Welcome back. You're watching Channel 1 News Hour. It's time for Perspective. And of course, the discussion we're having today is as regards the latest developments, directive by government ordering all heads of procurement and accounting to step aside pending investigations into graft. Remember, of course, on Friday, we did see President Uhuru Kenyatta order that all of them will have to undergo a polygraph test, and also they will be investigating to ensure that they weed out corruption in government. And of course, all these officers also asked to tender their documents, their assets and liabilities, as well as their papers to the government by Friday, and their deputies to take over office immediately as the government tries to put its house in order. And that is what we are discussing this evening. Our guests in studio, of course, we have with us Bishop John Warari from the Evangelical Association of Kenya, as well as John Sakwa, who is an advocate, and they will be helping us digest all this. Let's begin with you, Bishop. Your immediate reaction to the latest directive. What do you think?
Thank you so very much. I want to say it is appropriate, and I think it should have been done yesterday. Of course, we are going to have casualties, and change is painful. Our nation actually belongs to posterity, and we ought to leave this nation a better place for our children. And so it's a matter of principle, and the government is doing its work. And I think the filtering will be painful, but nonetheless it's needful. We need to face our fears, and from there we will have a better nation. Yeah.
Sakwa, from a legal point of view, I mean, natural justice demands that the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. What would you make of the latest development?
Yeah, of course, natural justice demands that all sides are heard. And before such a blanket decision is made, it's very paramount and very instructive to make sure that the person that you're dealing with have actually been implicated in a manner or another. So as then you may request that you guys step aside pending investigations, pave way for investigations, so as you may see what truly went wrong where. But issuing a blanket directive just to all government officials who are in charge of procurement and accounting officers, well, it is an effort to try and have the fight on graft stepped up. Maybe by trying to say that let us try a different angle. Maybe let's try to go to the root. Let's try and get to the bottom of it. But you see, when you do that again, you must be within the parameters of the law.
So are we putting the cart before the horse?
We are actually, because by so doing, what we're basically trying to say is that all these people blanketly are suspects. Even a suspect has rights. It's important to hear him out. And so when you say all of you step aside, let's have somebody else running that particular docket. The person who's running that particular docket has not been vetted yet as well. You understand? So for me, I thought, if then we are saying step aside, we should then replace them momentarily with persons that we think we have vetted.
They say that their deputies will step in the meantime.
But have they been vetted as well? They have not been vetted. You understand?
Bishop, I mean, what did you make of this? Do you think the government has the capacity, even as it says all of them to step aside, to be able to investigate all these cases?
It's a tall order, because really these are very many people. And then I think all of us will have to help the government, because the government, I want to believe it's you and me and those in leadership. I want to believe that if we are willing to get rid of the vice, we will be patient and we will have a goodwill, and not really being pessimistic, but we should be optimistic that this is the right thing, and we have to begin somewhere. If, unfortunately, it has to begin with those officers, procurement officers and the rest, that is where the cut will start.
Yes. But don't they have a right, to be heard before being judged and without being condemned and heard? I
think they will be given all the opportunity. I think this thing will be done in the open, and they will have the opportunity. Kenya, we have very good judiciary. We have very good courts and wonderful advocates like my brother John here. I think he's happy. John is very happy because here comes a very big opportunity for him to,
That's a good brief.
For him to represent,
to represent his clients. And we wish them well. Actually, we just don't want to bring this nation down. What we are saying, I think the government and the media and the church, we have had enough. And so thank God that the government has put its foot down, and we are saying we must clean house.
Swaka, are we likely to see some of these officers, move into court to also, want to be protected?
Definitely.
They have their rights to.
Definitely. Our constitution is very robust. The Constitution of 2010 gives a lot of latitude to litigants. And where you feel your right has been infringed upon, nothing stops you from petitioning the High Court of Kenya for some sort of reliefs. And if anyone will feel aggrieved that I've been told to step aside without the proper reasons, nobody has pointed an accusing finger at me. I've not been audited so as to the extent that a lacuna has been found within my docket, then why am I being told to step aside? If somebody moves to court, the court may give them injunctive orders or some sort of relief, saying let them continue holding those particular dockets. And so we might open it up to a lot of messy encounters between the government and its own officials. For me, I want to believe that the law is a bit clear that, of course, every suspect has rights. The one graft must be worn, but it must start from an individual perspective. Each one of us, not only those procurement persons, but graft has been able to run across and through our society. And so it begins with us as individuals.
Of course, this is a government directive that has come through a circular. I mean, if you don't have a letter on your desk telling you to step aside, are we likely to see them, not reporting to work tomorrow because it was with immediate effect?
Of course.
But if you don't have a letter, addressed to you, would you step aside if it was, you?
If you have a letter saying that you step aside, the only thing that can make you come back the following day is by going to court for a relief.
But this is a circular. They haven't received the letters yet. So should they step aside or they have to wait for?
No, individual letters ought to come because then you'll be acting from a rumor point of view. We had the announcements. I'm very sure the government, even after announcing the circular that the procurement officers and the accounting officers to step down in immediate effect, it must actually follow up with a letter. That is what the law actually requires of us, saying and explaining why they're stepping aside, for what period and for what purposes. That is a must.
So as of now, tomorrow we don't expect to see them, not coming to work?
No, they ought to. They ought to come to work until they receive the letter saying, now step aside. Yes.
All right. Bishop, this, what he just the blanket action that has been taken by the government. Don't you think perhaps it might begin to scare people about joining the public service? Because you don't know if tomorrow they are going to say everybody, whether you're guilty or not.
Yes, it may scare people. But I think it's preparing our nation for a better tomorrow, whereby we must be honest, we must be ethical, we must actually stand for the truth. And those people who are transparent and walking right, what do they have to fear, really? Because if you are delivering and you are not involving yourself in the scam, I want to believe your stay is safe. But if you have some underherds, some frauds and gray area in your life, then I'm sorry, you have to be afraid. Yes.
Is this perhaps the silver bullet that we've been waiting for?
No. Okay, you may look at it from different perspectives. Maybe the government may say it is. But again, I'll beg to define, say, you remember there's a time a list of suspects was tabled in Parliament, they were named out and all that, they were called out and we said, wow, there we are. And you saw the ripple effects. And so by just issuing a blanket order, and people will start feeling that we're being condemned unheard. And there'll be lots of litigations actually to protect themselves and to protect their positions. Because remember, some of these people, maybe they're approaching their sunset years. Some of them have really worked for the government for so long, and they're feeling like if I let things continue this way, I'm going home without any benefit. So we may see people moving to court for purposes of reprieve and say, you know what, I was condemned and had. For me, what the government ought to have done is to check out particular dockets which have been affected. And then, based on the credible information which they'll be having, they require the accounting officers and the procurement officers and whoever is responsible for that particular docket to step aside, indicating the reasons and saying, by stepping aside, we'll be covering these kind of areas during the investigations. But once you issue out a blanket order, then it affects both the suspects and also the innocent. And the suspects will hide within the innocent people, or the innocent persons will get swallowed by the suspects. And again, you end up with a situation which may not really have resolved your real intentions.
Do you think we should have done it differently, Bishop, perhaps, in terms of, based on what he's saying?
Yeah, really. The scriptures has a very good example of what he said, that there is a farmer who planted choice wheat. And when the farmer and his workers went to sleep, the following day, as they went to look at the farm, they found that the wheat had come up with tares. And the workers wanted to do what we want to do in Kenya. They felt we have to go and uproot the tares and save our wheat. But the owner of the farm said, while we slept, the enemy came and did this. But let's be careful, at least when uprooting the tares, we will also uproot the wheat. So I think caution here should be applied, and I'm not an authority in law, and I hear what he's saying, my brother John is saying, that we must have watertight cases. Because again, the most disappointing thing in this sweeping of corruption in Kenya is that we've had cases where culprits have been identified, but and then, for example, an institution like EACC thinks that we've a watertight case, they take it to the DPP, and then we hear there are a lot of holes that have been poked in the case, and we are disappointed. So I think diligence here must be applied, and people should not fear going to court, because the court is where the hair is split. You have to state your case, and indeed you are not guilty until proven guilty.
That's right.
So the institution that we have, our institutions, one, we must esteem our institutions. And one the reason why we have gone to this depth of hopelessness is because we have not really esteemed our institution. We've been mutilating our institutions, and it has been very disappointing. If we have trust in our courts, and indeed we do, let these officers with their advocates go to court, and some will be found clean, thank God, and they can go back to their work, and some must go home. Yes.
Okay, EACC, I mean, what do you think of its fate now, based on the government seems to have decided, to take the law, to go in this direction to deal with the problem of graft, because EACC, like I said, it hasn't produced much. What do you make of the fate?
Of course, when you come to budgeting and funding, EACC has been on the top there. Whatever they've requested for, they've been given. But you see, the investigations have been, in a way or another, mishmash. They've been in a state of El Dorado, whereby you see very high-profile cases being handed over to the prosecuting authority, who is the office of the DPP. As Bishop said, holes will be poked in, or even if they went to court, then they'll not meet the threshold of a conviction. And then we've seen very many people just walking away after a lengthy process, after a process that started very flowery, very soundly, and then it just dissipates. And then people have learned that that is how we've been dealing with graft. We start with very high-pitched voices, but the way matters disappear in court, the way people get acquitted, then nobody knows. But the government seems to have come to a point where it has to also shed its own image and say, listen, people will accuse us and say, what did you do? So let us grab the bull by its horns and deal with this monster called corruption. And for that, for me, I say, it's recommendable. Though, by doing so, we need not to be overzealous to the extent that we trample upon the same law, the same rights, which will later on require it in court to basically be able to bring forth the statement that we want to bring forth, and that is, this is graft. These people are corrupt. Let the law deal with them. Once you start infringing upon the rights of such people, then the law will come to their aid. So it will be counterproductive.
It will be counterproductive.
Yes.
All right. I'm informed we are almost running out of time, but what do you really think is the solution to the problem of graft in our country? This is a cancer that is obviously strongly with us.
Yeah, that's true. Corruption has eaten right into the fabric of our nation. And I want to believe it must start from me. For change must start with me. I must take responsibility. And like a patient will be helped by the doctor if they go to the doctor admitting that they are unwell. And that is what we should do. We should really admit that our foundation as a nation, they've been shaken. And we must go back to our Creator. When you get lost, you must go back to the crossroad where you missed the way, and from there you can retrace your steps back. So I would say the church and the religious sector, we have been vocal, and we will continue being vocal. We will continue using our prophetic mandate and pointing this nation to the right direction. So the healing and change will come when we go back to our Maker and ask for divine help. And then the responsibility of the government, the judiciary, and for us as Wanjiko, we must be willing to change. Yeah.
You've said that, then I remembered, what the president also said on Friday. He said, corruption is not just in the public service.
Yes.
We've seen preachers preying on their congregation.
Correct.
We've seen lawyers, taking advantage of their clients. I mean, is there a way that you also, as the members of the clergy, those in the church, do you have a way which you can be able to check on preachers who are also engaging in some of these activities?
Correct. Like our organization, which is an umbrella body, that is Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, we do have a code of ethics. We do have guidelines, and we have a council of bishops where if a preacher is getting out of way, we summon him and try to help him come back to the right way. And so I want to believe self-regulation is very important. And then if he oversteps, for example, we saw in the television some preachers who are just fleecing members of the public. In other words, those are criminals. And there is the penal code, there is the law, and they should face the law. What really?
But are we reining in on them? Because we know they're there, but in terms of action, what is it that you do?
Like I've said, our Evangelical Alliance of Kenya and Interreligious Council of Kenya, we do call these people, and we do have some work with them, because actually what is necessary is for us to shepherd the good and the bad. Because again, if we say we don't have bad members of the clergy, we are not honest. They are there. And what we should do is to keep on bringing them back to the line. And if they will not hear their fellow clergy voice, and we have the law of the land, they should face the law. And I think that is what the president said.
Swaka, lawyers preying on their clients.
No, of course. For every profession, there will be people who perhaps may not adhere to the code of conduct or the code of ethics. Having said that, we have formulations, and we have ways of dealing with this kind of their wrongdoing, especially to clients and to the members of the public. Of course, the Law Society of Kenya has its Complaints Commission, where you can lodge your complaint. And if it's weight enough, both the complainant and the accused, who is the counsel or the lawyer, will be called. They'll hear you out. And if there's a need, it will be moved over to the disciplinary committee, which will take action against that kind of person. So we have regulations. We have regulations to actually check out of this kind of bad habits or habits that may be endangering members of the public or clientele.
Okay, so what do you think really is the solution to perhaps the starting point in this war on graft, in your opinion, as we wrap up?
As I earlier said, this war will only be won if we go back to have a postmortem of individuals.
Okay.
It begins with me, begins with you.
So the vetting is a good way to start it?
Yes, individuals.
Okay.
But once we start attacking institutions, then it's well gone. The cancer's well spread. So you can't deal with an entire institution. It will be too taxing, too expensive, and it will be counterproductive. But us as individuals, we must start looking at it and say, what can I do? What is my role in this?
Okay.
Let me be straight, let me be clean, and let that counsel of cleanness and goodness spread to my neighbor. And once we do that, the whole of Kenya will be cleansed.
Will be transformed.
Yes.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Of course, I've been talking to Bishop John Warari from the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, as well as John Sakwa, who is an advocate, just trying to put into perspective some of the legal issues, and of course, what are some of the things that we can do as a country as the government steps up the war on graft.